We begin our report tonight in Poland, where 363 days after Russia invaded Ukraine, President Biden rallied NATO allies in person to reiterate that the alliance's support for Ukraine will not weaken. The day after his unannounced trip to Ukraine's capital, Mr. Biden declared to thousands in Warsaw, Poland, that Kyiv stands strong and free. But hours before President Biden's speech, Russia's Vladimir Putin escalated tensions with the U.S. and its allies during his State of the Nation address. Ed O'Keefe is traveling with the president and has the latest from Warsaw.
President Biden in Warsaw, President Putin in Moscow, with dueling messages on the eve of the first year of war in Ukraine. Mr. Biden recalled his high-stakes trip to its capital.
1 year ago, the world was bracing for the fall of Kyiv. Well, I just come from a visit to Kyiv, and I can report Kyiv stands strong. Kyiv stands proud, it stands tall, and most important, it stands free.
And he sought to shame Putin, accusing him and the Russian military of committing atrocities.
They've committed depravities, crimes against humanity, without shame or compunction. They've targeted civilians with death and destruction, used rape as a weapon of war.
Thousands of Polish citizens, Ukrainian refugees, and American diplomats and aid workers gathered to see the president, the centerpiece of a stage featuring smoke machines and resembling a rock concert. Hours earlier, Putin's national address was delivered to a room full of loyalists. He claimed Russia isn't fighting the Ukrainian people, but that they've become hostage to Western masters, and said the West is responsible for fueling the Ukrainian conflict. Putin also announced he's suspending participation in the last remaining nuclear arms reduction treaty with the U.S. National Security spokesman John Kirby called that announcement unfortunate and irresponsible.
At a time like this, you want to make sure that you can at least have some arms control in place.
Since President Biden took office, the U.S. has committed more than $30 billion in military assistance to Ukraine, including grenade launchers and small arms, anti-tank weapons, shoulder-fired missiles, armed drones, body armor, and helmets. There's also been $1.4 billion in humanitarian assistance. But on the streets of Warsaw today, the president saw signs reminding him many Ukrainians want much more.
President Biden has so far rejected calls to send military jets to Ukraine, fearing it could spark a third world war. Tomorrow, he's set to meet with leaders of the Eastern European countries that border Russia to reiterate U.S. support for NATO's eastern flank. John?
Ed, what does the administration make of President Putin's speech today, and do they see it as a reaction to President Biden's trip to Kyiv yesterday?
Well, they suggested that that is perhaps why he decided to speak today, because they claim that they've been planning for this speech to be held today for several weeks, if not months. So perhaps it was Putin who was scheduling and trying to counter-program the American president. But they saw it as an opportunity. Aides had cautioned in the hours before the speech that there was a very good likelihood that the president might tweak some of the language to respond to what Putin said. And the charge that he definitely did seek to clarify was the one you saw, where the president said, we are not seeking to invade Russia, reiterating once again directly to the Russian people that he wants peace and he wants them to come up with a better, more democratic, lowercase d society. So it did cause this tit for tat and this drama on the world stage today, but the White House insists they weren't the ones that tried to do it that way.
And does the Biden administration feel they need to react, or what do they make of Putin's decision to suspend participation in the nuclear treaty? How big of a deal are they acting like this is, and what's their public posture?
Irresponsible and disappointing is essentially what U.S. officials call this, but they also point out that in many ways Russia hasn't been compliant with New START for several years. That treaty, the last one between the two countries in terms of nuclear nonproliferation. So the other thing they caution is a lot of things have been said by Vladimir Putin, and he doesn't necessarily follow through. So they'll see whether or not there really is a plan to suspend the agreement, or whether perhaps he continues to allow inspections and continues to engage the United States on this. The other thing they're encouraged by is that neither Russia nor, of course, the United States and Ukraine have sought to use any nuclear weapons in the conflict.
Mistrust, but verify. Ed O'Keefe in Warsaw, Poland. Thanks, Ed.